All right, so today we're diving into something pretty interesting, I think. A whole stack of class rosters going all the way back to 1997. Can you believe it? It's like we've got decades worth of names here just waiting to be unpacked.
It's amazing what you can find, right? Each one of these names is like, oh, a little time capsule.
Exactly. So like,
Oh.
are we going to find any patterns in these names?
Mhm.
Trends over time? Maybe even someone we know? Who are all these kids?
Yeah. We can definitely look for all of that, see how things have changed over the years, like right away, just glancing at the 90s lists. So many Jessicas.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like
Yeah.
tons of Jessicas and Michaels too, right?
It's like a total blast from the past.
Totally. And you know what makes you think, like, were those names just super popular back then? Or is there something else going on?
Well, popularity plays a huge role. Think about it. In the late 90s, you had Jessica Rabbit, Jessica Simpson.
Oh, totally. Parents are influenced by, like, all that stuff. It seeps in.
Right. It's a reflection of the times. But then watch what happens when we hit the early 2000s. Ashley Marie, Jonathan David, double-barreled names everywhere.
Oh, wow, you're right. I didn't even notice that at first. Why the sudden change?
Could be a few things. Maybe parents wanted something a bit more unique for their kids, a little fancier.
That makes sense.
It was a trend all over, but especially common, say, in European cultures, Hispanic cultures, places where two last names are common. So maybe there's a bit of, like, cultural mixing happening there,
No,
too.
for sure. Which, actually, look at this. Further down the list, even more variety. Akihiro, Harold, Caddy. It's like the whole world's represented right here.
Oh, absolutely. Immigration was on the rise, globalization was connecting everyone, and people were becoming more open to different cultures. You see all of that reflected in the names parents chose.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it, like just a bunch of names on a page, but it tells you so much about what was going on in the world.
Ah.
Okay, this is interesting. The year 2000, Diego Fernando Gallardo Tamayo, 3 first names. What's the deal with that?
So triple first names aren't as common in every culture, but they often have to do with specific traditions. Like in some Hispanic families, all those names might be honoring different family members, or saints even.
Wow. Each name has a whole story behind it. Speaking of stories, check this out also in 2000. There's this student's name, but it's like partially covered up with hashtags.
Yeah.
Seriously, hashtags. What's that about?
That is pretty weird, I'm not gonna lie. Like, it makes you wonder, what happened there? Was it on purpose?
Maybe the teacher just like ran out of whiteout.
Maybe. Who knows? It's one of those little mysteries.
I kind of love it. Adds a little something extra to the whole thing.
Right. It's like you can't help but be curious.
Totally. Okay, another thing that caught my eye. In 2005, we've got Albuquerque Ramirez Sofia. That doesn't look quite right, does it?
Now that you mention it, it does seem like the last name's where the first name should be. Huh.
Yeah, like did they just flip it around by accident? Or is there something else going on there?
It could be a mistake, sure, but maybe, and I'm just like throwing this out there, maybe it's a cultural thing. Like in some cultures, the order of names isn't as strict.
Interesting. It's like a little puzzle. Which actually makes me think, have you noticed anything about like how many boys' names versus girls' names there are across all the years, I mean?
Ooh, good question. I mean, they don't actually say the genders on these lists, right? But we can probably guess based on the names themselves.
Right.
And it seems pretty balanced overall, I'd say. Although there are definitely some trends. Like in the early 2000s, tons of Madisons and Avas.
Oh, yeah. That tracks. Those names were like everywhere back then.
Exactly. Shows how much influence pop culture has. It's not just a random choice what you name your kid.
Totally. Okay, so one last thing. We've got these gaps in the rosters, right? Like 2006 is missing section C. And then 2011 and 2012 are formatted all weird. Any idea what that's about?
It's anyone's guess, really. But if I had to speculate, I'd say it's probably just administrative stuff. Maybe they changed how they kept records that year.
Or maybe, like, section C was added later. Like, they had so many kids, they needed an extra classroom.
Could be. It's a good reminder that even with something like this, there's always more to the story than meets the eye.
So, like, those sections hold, like, a whole other set of mysteries. What were those kids' names? Where are they now? Guess we'll never know.
It's true. Sometimes the things we don't know are just as interesting.
Yeah, for sure. But, okay, this is what gets me about all this. We've spent all this time with these names, right? It's like taking a peek into the past. These kids, all these names. Where are they now? What are they doing? Are they teachers, artists, maybe even podcast hosts?
It really is mind-blowing when you think about it. Each one of those names, it's a whole life lived. Maybe they moved to the other side of the world. Or maybe they stayed right here in town. We'll probably never know.
It's like it.
Yeah.
We haven't just been looking at a list of names. It's more like a list of possibilities.
Yeah.
All those hopes and dreams, all those paths they could take.
All starting right here on these rosters.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
kind of makes you realize even something as simple as a name can tell such a bigger story, And you know what? That's what I love about these deep dives. You come to learn about one thing, like these class rosters, but you end up thinking about so much more. It's like those names, they make you think about all the connections we have, all the different ways life can unfold. And on that note, hey, maybe take a minute and think about your own name, the names of your family and friends. What stories do those names tell? It's pretty amazing when you stop and think about it.